Welcome to the Zoo of London by Soren Ehrlich.
Banksy is an artist who's been prevalent in the street art world since the 1990s. Banksy's art is typically found like this. It's stencil design and it adorns the side of buildings as well as outdoor spaces. Most of their art is politically charged, usually drawing attention towards genocide, world wars, as well as excessive wealth. As for Banksy's actual identity, not many people know who they actually are. A lot of news outlets have no idea. And within the street art community, there are some who know of their identity, but it has been an agreement to not expose who Banksy actually is.
As of August 5th, Banksy had posted pictures of his stencil graffiti for 9 days, depicting an animal for each day. When looking at the vicinity of the art, it coalesces with areas of weapons and arm dealers in the UK. On the left here, we can see a map by CAT, which is a organization that exposes where arms dealers are. And on the right, we have a map of three of the locations of Banksy's pieces of art. There are a few interpretations of Banksy's art placement, and that relates towards calling attention towards arms dealers in the UK. This recent string of art featured many animals adorning the side of billboards, a police box, a fish bar, a satellite dish, and the side of the zoo in London. While some onlookers may be impressed at the seemingly random array of animals, some have theorized deeper meanings for these pieces. This video will focus on Banksy's recent pieces through analysis of Instagram comments, political atmosphere within the UK, and reflections on previous art from Banksy. These Instagram comments helped in understanding multiple perspectives of these pieces, and I'll also give my interpretation as well. Art in general allows viewers to use their lived experience to connect to these pieces in various ways. This allows for multiple interpretations, inspirations, and methods of calling to action. This is a power that street art holds as well. And due to the accessibility of those artworks living on the street, anyone walking past can enjoy these works of art. My perception is guided through my experiences, as others have their own lived experiences that brought them to their conclusions. The point of this video project is to allow for multiple views to be looked at, analyzed, as well as to give some of my own feedback and hopefully inspire you to reflect more on Banksy's work as well. First, we must highlight the pieces that have recently come out. Right here, you can see all of the pieces together. We will go through the pieces individually and talk about them more collectively at the end of this project. To begin, we first look at the goat that is depicted in Banksy's first piece. A mountain goat atop a slant in the wall stands teetering on its tiny surface. Below the mountain goat, the wall crumbles, and a camera on the same wall captures only the image of the wall crumbling under the goat's hooves. Capturing only the hooves and the crumbling rocks leads to the thinking of the whole picture. This camera only shows the destruction of the property below the hooves, but not the goat themselves. Some have made the connection between that goat and the Palestinian mountain goat, which is its national animal, as you can see here in this comment, and think that Banksy is speaking to the genocide and the ancestral lands of the Palestinian people. Banksy has worked on many projects, including the MV Louise Michael, a NGO that focus on sea rescues for asylum seekers. And they do this across the globe and currently are in the Mediterranean Sea. Banksy had a stencil done on one of MV Louise Michael's boats. He has proclaimed his disgust with the lack of empathy and care that people face in the eyes of borders. The first comment we see here is all eyes on Palestine, and this is due to the representation of their national animal, the mountain goat. Another person talks about how this has to do with weapons manufacturer. This building is also their workspace. All 5 works are located right next to or a few steps away from weapons or ammunitions dealers and manufacturers. So many eyes are unknowingly being brought near their locations, bringing unwanted attention to these businesses. Banksy's work typically has political tones, and given the immense number of people, and especially children enduring genocides, occupation, and colonization worldwide, I personally feel he is doing his part to bring attention to those who may be playing a part in creating and selling weapons and ammos in these massacres. At the beginning of this presentation, I showed you a few pieces that Banksy has done, a lot of them, again, calling attention towards genocide worldwide. So, for this piece to be referencing Palestinian genocide would not be outlandish. Let's look at a few more takes. Just visited, so cool. The building the art is on has to do with the British printing press. And perhaps the mountain goat is caught precariously between the written press and the social media, where the true nuanced story is harder to decipher. Again, we see this with Palestine now and the discrepancies between social media and the experiences of Palestinians in that country. The camera is looking at the falling rocks rather than what's causing them to fall. Goats are adapted, climbing on narrow ledges so it isn't in danger, but the camera's view doesn't give the full picture. So I'm guessing that it's referencing the need to understand news and context before forming an opinion. Again, a lot of this language seems to surround how media depicts certain groups. And so I would honestly agree and say that that's kind of what I was thinking. For my pure interpretation, I agree that this goat looks a lot like a Palestinian mountain goat. After looking at some images of them, the leg shape is pretty similar, the body shape is pretty similar. Banksy has spoken before on genocide, so I believe he would speak as well on Palestinian genocide. Another piece of this project is the camera's careful angle at the feet of the goat. I believe that this is also talking about not capturing the full picture. When looking at the destruction of property, that is a big conversation when it comes to police forces. Are police officers really protecting the people, or are they protecting property? All right, moving on to the next picture. Here we see two elephants stretch across windowsills. The left elephant reaching their trunk out towards the one on the right, reaching out almost apprehensively towards the other elephant. The elephant on the left has tusks, while the one on the right does not. Some have perceived these elephants as an African and an Asian elephant stretching across the world to connect to one another. Others have perceived this as language ignoring the elephants in the room. The current political climate in the UK and much of the world elsewhere is experiencing this as well. I think that this has to speak about the elephant in the room. I think that's a pretty good interpretation as we see this person walking by with ignoring what's happening in the city of London. The UK just recently had some right wing protests, and so graffiti, I feel like, always follows political acts. And this is a good representation of people ignoring the protests and right wing fear that is within the UK and is expanding worldwide. Here we have a few comments. The first one is regarding the different types of elephants and that they're reaching across the world. They're actually the same, and you got to reach out to each other in love, not hate. Second comment is walking by and ignoring the elephant in the room. Perfect representation of the UK right now. And then third comment talks about searching for connection. For me personally, I think that this art piece speaks about the elephant in the room as well as searching for connection and understanding that worldwide we are connected. We lived in a globalized economy, and with the power of technology, we have a lot more access to others across the world. We have to fight this fight of right wingness all together. I think that using these elephants as a conversation starter is really beneficial, as we can understand that we're not so different and the struggles that we face across the world may be similar, and then that should lead us to support each other and build community. This third image here is three monkeys swinging alongside an overland bridge in East London. These three monkeys all appear to be moving to the right side of the bridge, the farthest left mid-swing with one hand behind them, ready to use their momentum and swing out and reach forward. The middle one is holding the bridge, and the second hand is about to touch the edge of the bridge. Finally, the farthest right hangs from their tail, reaching towards a tree that is next to the bridge. The three monkeys may represent strength in numbers or blindly following the lead. As for interpretations of this piece, there weren't many in the comments. This is when more of the comments became centered around enjoying the art for its aesthetics rather than interpretations of the piece. I pulled a few comments here. I've got one animal isolated and helpless, two animals looking out for each other, three animals overcoming difficulties together. I really like this approach of the 1, 2, 3, as yes, the first image was the single mountain goat, the two elephants, and now the three monkeys. I think that oftentimes solidarity and community are how we can best overcome difficulties together. Another person had talked about that Banksy is clearly making the zoo in London right now. I think that this is a piece that we can keep in mind as the pictures keep going. And then keep in mind that as this project was continuing, there was an animal released each day, but there was no idea of how many animals and when the graffiti was going to stop. So Let's see how that progresses as we go farther along. Imans_91 has a longer take here that I'll read. Banksy's artwork featuring monkeys jumping along a tube over a bridge can be seen as the critique of the chaotic and irrational behavior in society, especially during the Trump era and the fears of terrorism. The monkeys symbolize the masses blindly following a fragile path, reflecting how populism and fear can lead to reckless actions. The bridge, representing connection and progress, becomes the stage for dangerous antics, highlighting the shift from the constructive dialogue to destructive behavior in contemporary politics. I think that this is one of the most in depth comments that I could find for all of the posts. A lot of the comments were pretty simple, one or two liners. But I think that this comment here is a good reflection of how I perceive this art as well, to be honest. I think that I am more of a fan of the blindly following idea that is sometimes associated with monkeys. I also think that when we see monkeys in art, oftentimes they are representing greed. So, how are these three monkeys moving along through a time of greed? And I also think that them moving to the right is a sign of that as well. They're moving to the right across the bridge. Greedy monkeys are farther on the right. All right, moving on to the next piece. A lone wolf stands inside a round white satellite dish atop a tagged shuttered building. The wolf satellite piece created quite a stir as three people were filmed stealing the wolf off the roof of the building. Unlike Banksy's previous pieces, this one was in a place where it could be more easily stolen. After all, Banksy could have painted this on the side of the building, but chose to instead paint it on the satellite dish. When participating in street art, artists are aware of how their work takes up the space, how it'll stay on the stage, and how it'll age. Banksy knew that painting on a satellite dish had different long-term possibilities than a brick wall or an old billboard or any other surface. I believe that the opportunity to steal the work was either a possibility that Banksy considered and was okay with, or was one that they manufactured. After all, this was not the first piece of art that Banksy's that's been stolen off the streets. And even Banksy has made some political statements when their art is sold at the highest auctions. I also think it's important to note that Banksy is against profiting off of their artwork, as seen here in an Instagram post. For those of you who can't read, I'll read it for you. Hey Banksy, I saw this and thought of you. You're funny. What the hell is that? An exhibition of your work in Moscow. They're charging 20 to get in. LOL. I wish I could find it funny. What's the opposite of LOL? I think it's LOL. You know, it's got nothing to do with me, right? I don't charge people to see my art unless there's a fairground wheel. They made it look kind of legit. I think you should probably do something. Can't you put out a press release? I'm not sure I'm the best person to complain about people putting up pictures without getting permission. Nah, mate, it's the principle. It's a ripoff. You have to do something. I wouldn't know where to start. By posting a screen grab of this conversation? LOL. I really take this as Banksy denouncing the use of their art and especially putting it behind a paywall. A lot of street art is really accessible to the public, and that's what makes it so beneficial to society. These takes are available for everyone to kind of ponder, and again, it's not behind a paywall. Let's go back to this wolf piece. A lot of the comments were honestly about how it had been stolen. Many of these comments were also pretty aggressive about the fact that it was stolen. Personally, I'm more of a fan of the idea that Banksy had manufactured this moment. Here, we see a piece of art stolen right off the building, even filmed. You can watch the video yourself. However, there are later stories of arts that Banksy had done and how they had been taken off the streets as well. So I would like to challenge you to think about how art is taken off the streets and when it is acceptable and when it is not acceptable. Some of the arts that I will show you later were taken off the streets, and the comment sections were very different than the comment section on this one. I personally interpreted this piece of art as a lone wolf standing by themselves, especially after the 1 and 2 and 3 animal depictions in the previous 3 artworks. Having this lone wolf standing by themselves in a place where they could be taken goes to show that we need community in order to be strong together. When we are alone, when we are separated from a stable place, that's when theft happens. This lone wolf is standing on top of a building, but it is not powerful on its own and is subject to being stolen due to its fragile connection to its community. All right, moving on to the fish bar picture. So this is Bonner's fish bar, and we have some pelicans portrayed on the side of this building. First of all, comparing it to the last, we had that wolf depicted, and the wolf was, again, alone at the top of a building on a satellite dish. This is now painted on a building, which makes it much harder to steal, right? So, the following piece portrays pelicans eating fish on top of a small corner shop named Bonner's Fish Bar. Since this piece followed the wolf satellite piece that was stolen, many of the comments on this post were about that it's in a less stealable place. For so many of the comments seem to be swayed in the direction of this, makes me further believe that that was on purpose. Also, there is value associated with Banksy's work, monetary and fame wise, which may help draw attention in different parts of the city than what's usually looked at. This mom and pop shop may have received more customers since Banksy's art now lives on their walls. And this, again, is some of the comments that we see here, these two comments. I think that this is Banksy kind of putting it out to the people that they're aware of the value of their art. The value of their art is permanent when it's on the side of a building. However, when their art is taken away, either by the destruction of the surface that it is on, theft, or putting it behind glass in a museum, Banksy's aware of all of these possibilities, right? And so by putting this piece of art here, I think its purpose was to draw attention to a smaller shop and then acknowledging the value of their own art as well as being able to put it in a permanent place as a stronger dichotomy of how that last piece was used. This next piece features a cat stretching within the frame of an old billboard. The wood within the billboard is backing is rotting and missing near the cat's front claws. Around the edges of the billboard, there's ivy overgrowing it, making it look untouched for years. While there weren't many comments analyzing this piece, some of the comments were about its removal. As we can see here, somebody commented, sadly, it's been taken down. And why have they taken it down? It's madness. Let people enjoy it. Underneath Heather.Edwards.1675 in the comments, people were talking about how it had been removed and that somebody said that they were going to put it in a gallery. Again, this is another conversation about how art is taken off the streets, right? If this art piece was truly taken with a promise to resell it to a gallery, how is this any different than those people who stole the wolf satellite dish? I feel as though the satellite dish being stolen could have been a performance that Banksy had set up or even expected. After all, they painted it on an object that could be removed. If Banksy was aware that their piece could be stolen, I also believe they're able to make a judgment about stealing and the public's difference in these reactions. This cat being taken down and being given to a gallery, even if this is true, is looked upon very differently than the three people who had stolen the satellite dish in the middle of the night. Thinking about art and the accessibility of it, one, is it okay for art to be taken off the street and protected? Or do we kind of understand how the language around this can be racialized and made about class as well? These piranhas are depicted swimming inside of a police city box. Nearby is a pole with a sign that states, quote, "If you can see this, we can see you," end quote. Even a cop is captured taking a picture of this painted police box. The police box was removed later that same day, which had taken yet another one of Banksy's pieces off the streets. Viewers related this art piece to George Orwell's Animal Farm, drawing attention to who is always watching along with a police call out. We got two comments here by Evolve, and I'll read them both. Quote, "The object of torture is torture. The object of power is power. The object of piranhas is to feed until nothing remains. The object of the police state power is to implode the will of the people until nothing remains." The second quote, "In a closed society where everyone's guilty, the only crime is getting caught. In a world of thieves, the only final sin is stupidity. The police behave like piranhas, circling in on anything that hints at weakness, devouring what they see as prey until there's nothing left but bones." I think that in a lot of street art, there are a lot of perceptions of the police as erasing art, as a system of oppression. Banksy, I don't think, escapes a stance, and by putting this police box, painting it with piranhas, kind of shows the aggression that's associated with this animal. Like, Banksy could have picked any animal for all of these pieces, and they chose piranhas for on the police box. I think depicting piranhas within the police box also shows more than just the violence and the hunger of the police, drawing attention to how they've dealt with these protests. I think that the fact that this is an image within the box, kind of shows that they protect who they want to protect. They won't protect you if they don't find it necessary. The placement also is very well done next to the sign. If you can see this, we can see you. In a surveillance society, we have to be really careful and mindful of what we do. Somebody is always watching, as many dystopian writers have talked about, and how and who the police chooses to watch over extensively is going to be different. I think this also takes us to our next piece, which is the rhino depicted mounting an old rundown Volkswagen. Car also has a cone on its hood, giving a rhino-like appearance. For me, why did Banksy choose this rundown car instead of a nice newer car? When thinking about this piece, the action of mounting something came in relation to the old and used up car. I felt like Banksy was trying to depict the rhino as fucking over the lower class, as shown by the older beat up car. I think that this piece, following the police piece, kind of speaks to classism and who is allowed to fuck who over. This is when more of the themes start talking about animal rights. In the comments, as we can see here, we have the stencil shed. To be fair, rhinos are running out of mating partners, so sad tones also. Again, we see something with, I believe it was destroyed today. There were a few other comments talking about how that car had been removed. Yet again, a piece of art was stolen off the streets. And why is it that when Banksy paints on billboards or on the sides of walls near like old cars, that they're stolen afterwards, right? There's value associated with this art, and people are aware of that, and people want to steal it, whether it's through just stealing it right off the streets, buying that property, or demolishing something that should have been demolished a while ago. This also speaks to the temporariness of murals. A lot of us can kind of see how murals oftentimes are depicted on walls that will eventually crumble. And for those people to be able to see that before it's taken down is really important. And that speaks to being mindful in today's society. You must keep your eyes open and you must look at your surroundings and how they are changing. This is going to take us to our final piece, which was stenciled onto the side of the London Zoo. The gorilla is portrayed holding open the siding of the zoo, releasing animals such as a hummingbird, parrot, seal, and butterflies towards the viewers. I interpret this as the gorilla has released the zoo upon the city, and that the city itself is now also a part of the zoo. When analyzing these pieces, it is important to note their location and the current social and political climate. With the ongoing war and genocide within Palestine, global right-leaning tendencies, increased division in politics in the US and the UK, it is hard to ignore the place who had recently had violent right-wing protests and not related to the zoo that the street art depicts it as. There was a need for social, economic, and ongoing change in 2020 when George Floyd was murdered within the city of Minneapolis and the greater United States and globally. There was an urge to dismantle the systems that have hurt minority groups for so long. When George Floyd was murdered, riots erupted in the streets across the US, where places were looted, graffitied, and broken by police violence. Much of the language mainstream entertainment news companies used associated the violence and destruction of property with protesters. However, police are known to cause more damage when they cut off protesters or corner them. This sparked a larger focus on graffiti art and turned street artists towards saying they had enough. While graffiti art has always been political, the 2020 anger and grief had brought people together, which led to outreach in the community support and protests. Walls across the United States were painted with pleas for change. Names of Black Americans who were killed by police officers were written and memorialized, and inspirational pieces searched to inspire hope. In a time of riots and right-leaning politics within the UK, I believe this is a similar follow-up to the events that occurred in the United States. Street art is so powerful because it can draw people's eyes towards larger issues, and the way that Banksy's art has created a network throughout the city and can hopefully inspire people to look more critically at how society has been struggling to be equitable, fair, and kind. The zoo has opened up in London, stretching across and drawing in gun ammunition manufacturers who sponsor wars across the world. Look not just at Banksy's art, but interpret it within the context of our right-leaning, genocide-sponsoring, and police-watching society that we have today. I feel personally that these art pieces speak more than just animals within the cage. I think that Banksy is aware of how people have been caged for too long within the confines of our society. This is not just Banksy releasing the zoo in the UK. The UK has been a zoo all along.